My dad and his new wife tried to take over my inherited home after their wedding. So I changed the locks and took back control. When my 70-year-old mother died of an unexpected stroke last year, I inherited the house I grew up in. Although losing Mom was painful, her meticulous planning helped me stay stable during this trying period. I have spent almost 20 years developing my business in financial consulting. When I was 7, my parents were divorced. Even though they shared custody, my mother and I were always closer. I never felt like a priority to my 73-year-old father, who was either preoccupied with business or dating. Since Mom had sacrificed her promising real estate career to raise me and support Dad's professional development in corporate finance, she acquired ownership of the property in lieu of alimony after the divorce. It has always been more than just a place to live in this large colonial-style home in the Massachusetts suburbs. There are memories of Mom everywhere, from the yard where we spent many weekends planting her favorite roses to the kitchen where she taught me how to make her renowned apple pie. Since my parents purchased it in the late 1970s, the house itself, a clean, 4-bedroom building with a wraparound porch, has served as our family's residence. As a child, I saw my mother make this house a cozy and inviting place. She maintained an amazing home for me while re-entering the real estate market even after the divorce. As Dad's corporate career took off, his visits became more and more infrequent. Although Dad would attend important occasions like birthdays and graduations, our bond never grew to the degree I observed in my classmates' bonds with their fathers. The terms of the divorce settlement had been simple. Dad no longer had to pay alimony, and Mom received the house. She had taken care of everything at home as he ascended the corporate ladder, supporting him during his early career. Instead of looking for continued support after their divorce, she insisted on keeping the house. She would often declare, "A home is more valuable than monthly checks," and her choice turned out to be sensible. She made sure I had a secure home life while she reconstructed her real estate career. My father invited his 61-year-old lover, Elizabeth, to our Christmas celebration 2 years ago. She arrived with her 2 kids from a prior relationship with her high school lover, Sarah, 41, and Rachel, 39. Similar to how their mother initially came across, the daughters were quiet and reticent. Elizabeth complimented Mom's decorating style and asked insightful questions about our family's customs, demonstrating her sincere enthusiasm in getting to know us. Over the next few months, we gradually but favorably grew closer to Elizabeth and her daughters. Elizabeth was considerate of our preferences by calling ahead to ask if she might bring something unique to our sporadic family gatherings. Despite their lack of warmth, her daughters were always courteous and appeared to value being a part of our family get-togethers. Despite Elizabeth's presence in our life, Mom remained incredibly kind. She would reply, "Everyone deserves a chance at happiness," but occasionally I could see a glimmer of grief in her eyes as Dad and Elizabeth would depart together. In retrospect, I saw how strong she must have been to greet them with such warmth. The loss was abrupt and terrible when Mom died last spring. She suffered a stroke while sleeping. The doctors claimed it was a peaceful but far too early death. She was planning to renovate the garden that weekend, and we had just talked about it over dinner the previous evening. Although I was devastated by the suddenness of her death, she had planned for everything because she was a realistic person. We learned that Mom had revised her estate plans about the time I turned 18 during the will reading. I left the house and most of her possessions. A note detailing her choices, specifically regarding the house, was also left behind. "This home has been your anchor through every storm. Keep it as your safe harbor, but never let it keep you from sailing towards your dreams." When the funeral arrangements were being made, Dad and Elizabeth provided the proper support. Mom's large photo albums for the memorial exhibit were organized by her children, and Elizabeth helped arrange the wake's refreshments. But after the will reading, I saw a change in Dad's attitude. He made multiple remarks about how he and Mom had selected the property together and how he had managed all the significant renovations over the years, and his congratulations on my inheritance felt forced. The weeks that followed the funeral were filled with paperwork and last-minute changes. Mom had set aside things especially for Dad, including his wedding jewelry and the presents he had given her throughout the years. I assumed he would find meaning in this gesture, but he appeared more preoccupied with the house. Because of his early foresight in selecting this site, he casually commented on how the area had improved and the property worth had gone up. I stayed in the house and took solace in following Mom's rituals. Even though I was never as good with roses as she was, her garden became my weekend project. In an attempt to create a new normal for myself, I turned one of the spare bedrooms into a home office because my job as a financial advisor permitted me to work from home to some extent. Dad called to tell Elizabeth that he was engaged about 6 months ago. In order to save money on hotel expenses, he proposed that they spend the weeks before the wedding at my place. The house was spacious and Elizabeth's daughters were working from home. He made it look like a win-win situation by offering to divide the household expenditures and utilities. A month ago, the arrangement began, and at first, it seemed like a good thing. Conversations over coffee in the morning and family dinners in the evening filled the house. Elizabeth demonstrated her culinary prowess by frequently cooking for everyone. Even though they were still reticent, her girls appeared to be coming around to the notion of our blended family. The house started to feel less empty than it had after Mom's death. Then, 3 days prior to the wedding, Dad requested a private meeting in Mom's favorite place, her garden. He disclosed that he wanted them to live in permanently and that their return was not just for the wedding. By claiming that he was concerned about my living alone in such a big house, he pretended to be concerned for my welfare. He stated, "Your mother would have wanted you to have a family around you," but I began to question whether Mom would have concurred. The request evoked complex emotions. There was a part of me that missed the family dynamic I had been living with for the last month. The presence of people made the place feel cozier, and Elizabeth had been incredibly gracious. However, there was something strange about Dad's strategy. I kept thinking about his past responses to the inheritance and his trite remarks regarding the property's worth. I told him I wanted time to consider my options and would make a decision after the wedding, rather than responding right away. It was telling how he responded to this simple request. Before he could conceal it with comprehension, a glimmer of irritation appeared on his face. It brought back memories of my early years when his intentions and my needs had clashed. Now that the wedding is only a few days away, I'm at a turning point. Following the ceremony, they are expected to remain here for a few more days before returning to Houston. I'm starting to think that I should grant their request to make this arrangement permanent. We have demonstrated over the past month that we can live in harmony with one another, and having other people around makes the house feel less empty. But I can't get rid of the persistent sense that something is off. Warning signs include Dad's obsession with the house's worth, his subtly expressed irritation at my hesitation, and his attempts to remind me of his role in its acquisition. Elizabeth has been flawless, almost too flawless, and I question whether their motivations go beyond simple familial ties. A part of me regrets questioning their motives. This is what healed families do after all. Join forces, help one another, and use the fragments of what was destroyed to create something new. However, there's another part of me that cautions me, maybe the one that acquired Mom's pragmatic temperament. Even though I've dedicated my professional life to assisting people in making wise financial decisions, this circumstance has me doubting my judgment. My normally clear thinking seems to be obscured by the emotional complexities of family relationships. I would definitely benefit from an independent opinion on whether my suspicions are justified or if my gut is attempting to keep me from making a grave error. Does sharing your inherited house with family cause you to feel this conflicted? Should I believe my intuition that something is off, or am I allowing disappointments from the past to cloud my assessment of the current circumstance? First update. After my last post, things swiftly got out of hand. The wedding took place at the Grand Hotel downtown this past weekend. Despite my misgivings, I assisted with the preparations and even made a courteous toast. Everything appeared to be picture perfect, and Elizabeth's daughters were bridesmaids. Around 8 a.m. on the morning following the wedding, I woke up to a strangely silent home. After the festivities, I initially believed that everyone was sleeping in. However, I discovered a hurriedly written letter on the kitchen counter, "Gone for our honeymoon," when I went downstairs to make coffee. "Return in a week." They had not informed me of their departure. Nothing had been discussed regarding their leaving time or their plans during the wedding preparations. They were gone, yet their personal effects were still strewn throughout the guest rooms. Both Elizabeth and my father's phone calls ended up in voicemail. Elizabeth finally picked up her phone around midday. Her customary charming manner was entirely absent from her tone. "Did we forget to let you know?" "I apologize for that," she added, clearly not being sincere. She yelled, "You're not a child anymore," when I voiced my worries about not being told. "We needed some privacy because your father now has a new family." From there, the discussion just grew more heated. They were going to remodel their rooms when they returned, and she had the gall to tell me to get over myself and tidy up the house before they did. At that moment, something inside of me exploded. For the following few hours, I took pictures and films of everything, including their possessions, the condition of the house, and the message they left. I then had all the locks changed after contacting a locksmith. After recording everything, I packed up their possessions and put them in waterproof containers on the covered porch. I sent a message to Elizabeth and my father. "Your belongings are packed and on the porch. You have until Sunday to collect them. Anything left after that will be donated to charity. Do not attempt to enter the house. The locks have been changed, and I will contact the police if necessary." The reactions were explosive and happened instantly. Messages from both of them began flooding my phone, alternating between guilt-tripping and asking, "How could you do this to your family?" Elizabeth's kids also joined in, writing letters blaming me for destroying the family and threatening to make you regret your choice. My father's voicemail, which said, "Your mother would be ashamed of your behavior," was what really got to me. He conveniently forgot that he had been coveting the house since Mom's death. "We were trying to help you, and this is how you repay our kindness." I have blocked their numbers for the time being, but I have saved all of their voicemails and texts. I also told my neighbors about the incident and put in security cameras. Some of them offered to watch the house while I'm at work since they remembered how Dad handled Mom during the divorce. They still haven't gathered their possessions after 3 days. Everything is going well on the porch because of the nice weather, but I'm growing more and more annoyed with their games. I spoke with a lawyer, who affirmed that I had the right to have their possessions taken away because I had given them adequate notice. Their social media participation has been the most illuminating aspect of this experience. Ignoring my comments about gathering their belongings, they have been sharing many honeymoon pictures with remarks about new beginnings and family unity. Elizabeth even had the audacity to post about toxic people who can't handle others' happiness. Their perfect family act was simply that, a show, I see now. Their actual nature is demonstrated by the way they went from being kind and considerate to being conceited and combative when things didn't go their way. I'm glad I followed my gut and refused to accept their long-term living arrangement before getting to know them further. Even though I now realize it wasn't real, I still miss the sense of family we had when they were here. True colors show not in good times but in how people handle disappointment, Mom used to say. The way they responded when I said no, told me all I needed to know about them. Has anyone handled comparable family circumstances? How did you respond to the fallout? Although I'm not changing my mind, I would like some guidance on how to handle the flying monkeys they are sending my way. Second update. 2 weeks have passed since my last post, and the actual narrative has now surfaced. Their desperate attempts to move in are explained by what I found, and it's worse than I thought. My father's old coworker, who has been a family friend for 30 years, contacted me yesterday. She disclosed that my father had been dismissed 3 months prior for mishandling company cash, so he wasn't taking a break from work as he had said. It seems that he had been making dangerous financial choices without the required approval, which resulted in large losses. The reality of their financial circumstances is startling. He used all of his retirement funds to cover the $45,000 cost of the wedding at the Grand Hotel. They spent an additional $30,000 on their 2-week Maldivian honeymoon, which was paid for by selling his investment holdings. When they became engaged last year, Elizabeth resigned her work as a real estate agent, confident in my father's 6-figure salary and their intended relocation into what their acquaintances called their future family home. Yes, that's how they described my house. They had planned their entire budget with the presumption that I would allow them to live with me permanently. They had already begun selling some of their furnishings and given notice of their move to Houston. They actually have nowhere else to put their possessions, which is why they are still on my porch. According to mutual acquaintances, they had been spreading the myth that I was staying in their home temporarily because of my mother's misguided sympathy. They presented themselves as kind by letting me stay while I got back on my feet. The truth is, of course, that I'm a successful financial consultant who makes 6 figures of my own money, and the house is legally mine. More unsettling revelations were revealed by my father's former coworker. Bad investments weren't the only reason he was fired. At work, he had been acting more and more erratically, making lofty claims to clients and getting indignant when asked about his tactics. Although no one is certain, some believe he was attempting to recuperate from losses on his personal investments. Elizabeth's actions suddenly make perfect sense. Her performance of being the perfect homemaker was a deliberate one. She had been telling her friends that she could concentrate on making a proper family environment, rather than working if she lived in my home. She had gone so far as to show her friends Pinterest boards of the alterations she intended to make to my mother's garden. Social media pictures from their honeymoon now paint a different picture. My father's exhausted retirement fund provided the funds for each magical moment they spent together. Literally, their posts about new beginnings were a bet to take over my house. They tried a different strategy after discovering their possessions were still on the porch after their honeymoon. Elizabeth apologized tearfully over the phone, saying that the stress of the wedding had taken over her. By implying that we might support one another during trying times, my father tried to present a picture of family unity. In the process, they unintentionally disclosed more of their scheme. They expected me to eventually give them ownership of the house, not just to move in temporarily. They specifically stated that we should combine our family resources for everyone's benefit, which presumably meant that I would give them my inheritance. Since then, I've found out that when they bought the house, they had already spoken with a real estate agent about financing alternatives and the house's possible value. My lawyer has urged me to submit a formal cease and desist letter over their misrepresentation of the house's ownership. They had even contacted a contractor about possible renovations, posing as the owners who were generously letting their daughter stay for now. In case legal action is required, we are also recording all of their communications and posts on social media. Stories of Elizabeth surveying the garden and talking about her remodeling ideas while I was at work have been shared by a number of neighbors. One neighbor even claimed that, without my knowledge, she had asked prospective contractors to come look at the property. Their complete financial desperation is now evident. The entire amount of my father's severance pay was used to plan the wedding. The cost of the wedding and honeymoon entirely drained his retirement funds. After giving notice on their apartment, they no longer have a place to live in Houston, and Elizabeth's sudden resignation has strained relations with her previous work. A few months' worth of living expenditures would not be covered by their present liquid assets. As they consider their options, they are now lodging at a low-cost hotel. Elizabeth has stopped posting on social media, with the exception of ambiguous statements like hidden blessings and family betrayal. My father has shifted from irate demands to frantic entreaties, but I'm refusing to back down. Some relatives say that since he is still my father, I ought to assist them in getting out of this situation. But as a financial advisor, I am aware that encouraging bad financial choices just makes matters worse. Furthermore, their attempt to use coercion to get me to leave my house reveals their actual motivations. Although I hope that legal action won't be required, I'm working closely with my lawyer to document everything. Next week, I will begin therapy to deal with the improved security system in the house. I recognize the irony. I, the daughter he never had time for, have created a secure existence via careful preparation, whereas my father, who worked in finance for a living, has ruined his retirement by bad financial choices. Even though she would be disappointed to see him go this far, Mom would appreciate the poetic justice. Has anyone else found relatives who have committed similar financial frauds? How did you manage to keep your distance while dealing with the betrayal? The rage is no longer the difficult thing. It's the melancholy of understanding that my father hasn't really changed. He has lured others into his plans, but he is still the same man who always prioritizes his own demands. I appreciate all of the help that this community has given me. I was able to stand by my judgments and follow my gut thanks to your advice. I'm concentrating on safeguarding my house and myself while I try to come to terms with this treachery. I'll provide another report when there are noteworthy developments. Third update. This scenario has finally come to an end after weeks of drama, and it's almost poetic. My father and Elizabeth left town today, but not because they wanted to, but because Elizabeth's ex-boyfriend unexpectedly stepped in. They were sleeping at a cheap hotel when we last left off, running out of money and options. I kept recording their actions, including their attempts to disseminate false information about me throughout the neighborhood. I was unaware that Elizabeth's girls had contacted their father to inform him of the terrible predicament their mother had found herself in. Michael, their father, is reportedly a prosperous Houston businessman. Over the years, he remained friendly with Elizabeth, focusing mostly on their daughter's welfare. He made the decision to step in after learning of Elizabeth's current predicament, that she was unemployed, effectively homeless, and complicit in a plot to seize my home. This developed in a pretty amazing way. Michael sent me an unexpected email last Tuesday. He said he was sorry to speak with me directly, but he needed to double-check certain information. What their daughters had told him was very different from what Elizabeth had told him. He was horrified by his ex's actions after our talk. Later on, I found out that Michael had been becoming increasingly alarmed as he saw Elizabeth's increasingly frantic social media messages. The last straw for him was learning that she had been applying for short-term loans in his children's names, which would have affected their credit scores. What followed was a masterclass in problem-solving techniques. Under certain restrictions, Michael volunteered to pay for their return to Houston. He made sure Elizabeth could resume her profession by setting her up for interviews with a number of real estate companies with which he had relationships. But in order to take advantage of these chances, she had to stop attempting to seize my belongings. The best part was seeing their meticulously crafted facade fall apart. Their social circle was informed by Michael that the story about them owning my house was a pure fabrication. In response to Elizabeth's social media posts about their family home, he even went so far as to write a kind but stern correction. After being humiliated by the revelation of his financial mishandling, my father eventually abandoned the facade. He acknowledged that their joint goal to buy my house had been a driving force behind the entire marriage and a rare moment of candor during a phone call that I recorded with his consent. Elizabeth had convinced him that they could work together to coerce me into selling it to them or sharing ownership. Elizabeth's daughters, who felt bad about playing a passive part in the plot, exposed the depth of their preparation. They posted screenshots of group chats in which my father and Elizabeth talked about different ways to control me. Among these were Elizabeth's conscious attempt to be the ideal stepmother and their well-thought-out choice to make their marriage announcement right when they knew I was most lonely. Michael's involvement included accountability in addition to financial support. He offered to pay for their first month's rent and moving costs in Houston, but only after they agreed to stop communicating with me unless I asked them to and signed legal papers admitting they had no claim to my property. Their departure was telling. Rather than offering an apology, they utterly ignored their botched attempt to seize my house by sending out a mass email to friends and relatives, saying they were going back to Houston for exciting new opportunities. As if this wasn't a retreat in shame, Elizabeth even had the gall to share pictures of them departing with statements about closing chapters and new beginnings in the captions, along with hashtags for luxury living. Yesterday, my security cameras caught them making a final drive by my house. They didn't stop, but they did slow down for a moment. Their possessions were already en route to Houston after being transferred to a storage facility at Michael's expense. It has been surprisingly quiet since. My neighbors have been tremendously supportive as they have watched this drama play out. I became aware of how frequent these circumstances are after hearing several people relate their personal tales of family property disputes. Several individuals have apologized for believing Elizabeth's stories, and the local community, which she attempted to infiltrate, has come together in support of me. I've begun going to a support group for those who are coping with family separation. It's assisting me in processing the range of feelings involved in this circumstance, including anger at their attempted deceit, lingering sadness over losing the little relationship I had with my father, and relief from their manipulation. The house feels different today, serene yet not empty. I've begun remodeling in an effort to make new memories rather than destroy old ones. Now that Mom's garden is flowering once again, I've joined a local gardening club to learn the appropriate way to take care of her prized roses. Working in the same area where she experienced such delight is helpful. In fact, this experience has helped my career. I now have a very intimate understanding of how family dynamics can affect financial decisions because I work as a financial consultant. Although I don't share my personal narrative, I'm more suited to guide clients through comparable circumstances. I recognize the irony of having to deal with a financially reckless parent while working as a financial advisor. Mom was correct when she declared that the best investment was education. I was able to identify the warning signs in their behavior early on thanks to my professional experience. Regarding the future, I'm concentrating on establishing wholesome connections. My friends that supported me during this time have grown to be like family. Even the person I'm seeing is surprisingly more interested in my business than my belongings. I've learned from this experience that family is about respect, integrity, and sincere concern for one another's welfare rather than about having the same DNA or legal titles. My mother was aware of this, which is why she took such care to safeguard my fortune. I want to thank everyone who read my tale and gave me advice. Your encouragement kept me going when I started to doubt myself. To people in comparable circumstances, follow your gut, keep a journal, and resist the need to compromise your limits out of embarrassment. Unless something important occurs, I don't anticipate posting any further updates. Now living in Houston, my father and Elizabeth are beginning a new life without access to my house or money. Every now and then, Michael updates me, mostly to make sure they're honoring their commitment to keep away. Mom would be happy with the way I handled this, not because I was tough, but because I upheld my morals and preserved the heritage she had worked so hard to leave me. That's what counts most in the end.